November 121 Mike, your turn. Taxi 111.
Hi, I'm Mike Thompson, and welcome to 121 Point Mike. Today's ground school video will cover the most exciting part of your flying journey, the first takeoff. I don't know though, it's not all exactly downhill from here. There are plenty of exciting moments, but up to this point at least, it'll probably be the most exciting thing for you. Use the appropriate checklist to make sure that you got everything in order. It'll be called the pre-takeoff or takeoff checklist most likely. At non-towered airports, you're going to announce your intentions like this. Garnet traffic, Skyhawk 121 Mike, departing runway 1 to the north, Garnet. Go watch my video on ground radio if you have no idea what I just said. But once you've announced your intention to take off, you're going to apply full power and use coordinated efforts on the controls to keep your airplane on the center line and your wings level. Remember those control positions from the taxi video? The same thing applies here for a bit. You'll gently move the controls to takeoff position as you increase speed. You're going to keep one hand on the throttle so that you can quickly cut power if there's a problem. You'll make your takeoffs with one hand on the wheel, so to speak. You're going to need to keep that nose on the center line, so you'll be dancing on the rudder pedals. Stay off the brakes unless you don't have direct steering. The rudder won't become effective as a directional control until you get enough air moving over it. As you accelerate, you'll see your airspeed needle come alive. When you reach rotation speed, you'll gently pull back and hold the yoke in that position until the airplane lifts off. Your instructor will advise you as to the proper pitch angle and best climb speed for your aircraft. He will probably have you climb at what's known as VX or VY. These are test questions, and each V speed has a label. By the way, you've already passed through VR, which was your rotation speed. VX is the best angle of climb, and VY is the best rate of climb. VX will give you the greatest pitch angle and the most altitude gain for a given distance traveled across the ground. You'll use VX when you want to clear obstacles in a hurry, like on a short field takeoff. I typically use VY, which is best rate, and it's a bit higher airspeed than VX. VY will give you the greatest altitude gain in the shortest amount of time. That's what I use most of the time, and I bet you will too. Now on takeoff, did you notice that your nose wanted to turn left? I bet you did. This is the propeller factor, or P-Factor. 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 It's named after the propeller, not that nervous reaction that some new pilots get. You might see P-Factor on a test. But what is it? Well, it's a combination of things. Your test is going to want you to know that the propeller blades have an angle of attack, and it's slipstream. So let me explain this a little bit further. When your plane was rolling down the runway, the propeller was basically perpendicular to the relative wind. So here's the definition that you'll need to know as well. Angle of attack. AOA. Angle of attack. This is the angle between the relative wind and an airfoil. An angle between the relative wind and an airfoil. Typically we're talking about wings and tails, but the propeller is an airfoil too, and this AOA thing is half the reason for P-Factor. Once the airplane starts to climb, you've now got one blade that's taking a larger bite out of the air. It's got a larger angle of attack than the opposite blade, and that's the blade that's moving down. And when you've got a force at a distance, you have a torque. And looking at it from the top, you can see that we have a larger force on the right side than we do on the left for a conventionally rotating engine. The difference in forces causes a left turning tendency, which must be countered by the right rudder. That's P-Factor Part 1. Now Part 2 is due to slipstream effects. When you have a big set of blades spinning, you'll get a spiral airflow. And that should make intuitive sense, right? Let me know, of course, if it doesn't. But you can probably envision this slipstream spiraling back along the plane, and as it does that, it hits the plane. And it hits the tail most prominently. It hits it from the left side, which pushes the tail to the right, which causes the nose to turn left again, which must be countered with the right pedal. So there are two main things at play with the P-Factor. The dissymmetry of thrust on each side of the propeller due to the angle of attack, and the slipstream striking the tail. If you do not apply right rudder as you begin your climb, your ball will drift off center, and your flight is no longer coordinated. The higher your pitch angle and power setting, the more right rudder you're going to need to keep the inclinometer centered. If you don't know how to interpret this ball, then go watch my video on turn indicators. Now you know what you need to know about P-Factor for your test and real-life flying. Your initial climb out will be made with full power, and you're going to keep one hand on the throttle and one on the stick. That's likely all you can do. Most of us only have two hands. I've seen people with fewer, but not more. Once you leave the ground, you'll set up a crab angle into the wind to maintain a straight track in line with the runway. I know it's a lot to remember, but we're expected to stay aligned with the runway until we reach a safe altitude to turn. There can be obstacles on either side of the runway, or there can be traffic on a parallel runway that, we'd like to avoid. It's also prudent to stay in line with the runway in case your engine quits. You might be able to land before you run out of pavement. This is why we keep one hand on the throttle, so that we can cut the power quickly if we need to get back on the ground. Once you're out of runway though, you're going to stay on your runway heading and continue climbing until you're advised by your instructor or controller. More altitude is always more better. Well, you've completed your first takeoff and climb out. Now you need to get back to the ground, but that'll be a different video. If you're going to go right back to the same runway, then you'll be flying the traffic pattern, and you need to know how to fly one. This might be a good time to go check out my video on traffic patterns if you haven't already. I'll have a landing video coming shortly, so I wouldn't advise applying the knowledge in this video until you've at least seen that video. But go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. That'll really help me out with YouTube's algorithms, as will leaving a comment and engaging with a lively discussion down there. And stay with me on 121 Point Mike.